Across our planet are borders so bizarre that they seem almost impossible. Sometimes a street, a river, or even a front yard splits two nations, but what happens on each side is often wildly different. Why is one side rich, the other poor? Why does one half of an island dance all night while the other shuts down at 6 p.m.? Today, we uncover the world's most unbelievable dividing lines. From the luxury of the United Arab Emirates beside Oman's calm to the hunting stillness of North and South Korea. These are 15 borders with mind-blowing differences on each side. Number 15, the India and Bangladesh border. Most borders are strange, but this one, it was chaos mapped out. Before the fences and the protests, the line between India and Bangladesh looked like scattered pieces of a broken puzzle. And today, that chaos has only grown. India and Bangladesh once agreed not to build any military or security structures within 280 miles of the border unless both sides approved. But between 2010 and 2023, India built fences in about 160 locations without Bangladesh's consent. That triggered tension. Bangladesh's interim government blamed the previous prime minister, accusing her of giving India too much ground. In response, angry citizens joined forces with the border guard Bangladesh, forcing India to halt fencing work in several places. Then the diplomatic clashes began. Bangladesh summoned India's High Commissioner to protest. The next day, India called in Bangladesh's acting High Commissioner. India claimed illegal migration from Bangladesh was becoming a serious issue. They said both sides already had an understanding about fencing and expected it to be followed. While officials from both countries said the issue could be solved through dialogue, observers warned the situation was heating up fast. But how did this border become so messy in the first place? In the northeastern region of Cooch Behar, the border once looked like a maze. It wasn't just a straight line. It was broken up into pieces called enclaves. These were bits of one country trapped inside the other, and sometimes even enclaves within enclaves. At one point, there were 198 enclaves in total. India had 106 enclaves inside Bangladesh, and Bangladesh had 92 inside India. Some were tiny, others large enough for villages, but none were connected to their own country. People stuck in these enclaves lived in limbo. An Indian enclave inside Bangladesh had Indian citizens with no access to Indian services. Bangladeshis in Indian enclaves had the same problem. There were no schools, hospitals, or proper roads. Many couldn't get birth certificates, IDs, or marriage licenses. For decades, they weren't legally stateless, but they couldn't vote, own land, or get basic services. Talks between the two governments stalled and nothing changed. Then in 2015, everything shifted. India and Bangladesh signed the Land Boundary Agreement. They agreed to swap 162 enclaves. People inside were allowed to choose which country they wanted to belong to. The results? More than 50,000 people finally got legal status. They could vote, get ID cards, and access healthcare and education. Border fences were removed, and roads and electricity were built. Life began to move forward, but unfortunately, today's fencing disputes threaten that progress because while leaders talk of peace, the trust is audibly fragile. Number 14, the Tijuana-San Diego border. Just 1/100 of a mile of dusty earth and rusted steel is all that separates two different planets, San Diego, California, and Tijuana, Mexico. But don't let the maps fool you. These cities sit under the same sky, yet each side of the border reveals a starkly different reality. Looking toward the horizon from a drone's eye view, it's almost unbelievable. San Diego gleams with neat roads, green lawns, and sprawling suburbs. Everything seems orderly, patrolled, and protected. But right across the border wall, it's chaos in color. Tijuana buzzes with life and energy. Off-ramps twist like spaghetti. Taco stands line every corner. Unpaved roads stretch into dusty hills. This isn't about architecture or landscaping. It's a stark divide written into income, infrastructure, and opportunity. The average household in San Diego earns nearly $90,000 a year. Clean streets, well-funded schools, and polished parks are part of everyday life. But in Tijuana, Families survive on around $14,000 to $17,000, and many live without paved roads, running water, or proper sanitation. So how can two cities just 20 meters apart feel like they're on different planets? Part of the answer lies in what happens at the wall itself. Because, despite how imposing it looks, this barrier is alive with movement. Over 300,000 people cross this border every single day, making it the busiest land crossing anywhere in the world. From early morning to late at night, workers from Tijuana head north to staff hospitals, clean houses, or study at American schools. Meanwhile, Americans cross the south for dental work, discounted medicine, or simply a cheaper way to relax on the beach. Yet, for all this back and forth, the wall is both a gateway and a trap. With the right ID, you can pass through in minutes. But if you're an asylum seeker or just someone trying to find a better life, the wall becomes a brutal dead end. And now, just steps from that wall on the San Diego side, something even more jarring has appeared. Migrant camps lined with tents, some pressed against multi-million-dollar homes. What does it say when desperation and wealth sleep under the same sky, separated only by a few feet of sidewalk? Number 13, the North Korea-South Korea border. This heavily guarded border on Earth is one of the most secure, and the line between North and South Korea stretches across the Korean peninsula like a scar that no one is allowed to heal. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a stretch of green hills and fencing. But beneath the surface, this place tells the story of two worlds locked in time. This border is officially called the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. But don't let that word fool you. There is nothing truly demilitarized about it. On both sides of this narrow strip of land, thousands of soldiers stand ready, bunkered down behind barbed wire and heavy artillery, just in case history decides to repeat itself. The DMZ is only about 155 miles long and 2.5 miles wide, but in that space lies a silence filled with tension. Since 1953, when the Korean War came to a bitter halt, this boundary has stood still. No peace treaty was ever signed, and technically, the war never ended. What remains is a frozen battlefield, where time seems to have stopped and fear lingers in the fog. Perhaps the most surreal spot on this border is the village of Panmunjom. This is where the leaders of the two Koreas sometimes meet. The small blue conference buildings that straddle the dividing line are watched over by guards who stand motionless, their eyes locked forward and trained not to blink. Beyond the militarized edge, however, the contrasts between these two countries become even more haunting. On one side, South Korea pulses with modern life, home to K-pop, skyscrapers, and some of the fastest internet in the world. On the other hand, North Korea remains cloaked in secrecy, where electricity is scarce and information is a tightly controlled weapon. From the sky, the difference is even more glaring. South Korea glows brightly at night, but look north, and you'll see only darkness, almost as if the land itself is asleep. And yet, despite the layers of concrete, wire, and ideology, nature has reclaimed parts of this forbidden zone. The DMZ, untouched by human development for decades, has become a natural haven. Rare birds, wild deer, and even endangered species now roam freely in this land, where no human dares to live. Number 12, the Gibraltar-Spain border. Down at the southern tip of Europe, where the land narrows and the sea stretches wide toward Africa, there's a place where history, power, and geography all collide. It's not a big place. In fact, Gibraltar is barely 2.33 square miles in size. But what it lacks in space, it makes up for in significance. Right here, between the British overseas territory of Gibraltar and the Kingdom of Spain, runs one of the most unusual borders in the world. Locals call it La Verja de Gibraltar, or simply, the fence. But this isn't just a simple fence. It marks a division between two nations, one British and one Spanish, and between two deeply rooted histories that don't always agree. From the coastline, the views are stunning. The Bay of Algeciras, or as many call it, the Bay of Gibraltar, wraps around the shoreline, and it's easy to forget there's even a border nearby. But if you look closely, from certain high points, the separation becomes clear. you can see Gibraltar Airport, its runway stretching across the narrow land. And just beyond it, like a thin scar across the landscape, lies the boundary line. Walk a little further and you'll spot the border fence stretching into the sea with metal posts planted into the shallow waters. On one side, there's Gibraltar, with its familiar British red mailboxes, English pubs, and Union Jacks fluttering in the breeze. On the other side, there's La Línea de la Concepción, the Spanish town that borders it, where signs change to Spanish. Siestas are a daily tradition, and life runs to a different rhythm. Now here's something to think about. What happens when two identities, two systems, and two governments have to share a single piece of rock? The boundary isn't always easy to see, but it's there. In some places, it's just 5 or 10 meters from the water marked only by maritime law. From above, you can draw an invisible line from the sea straight across the land, past the airport's northern edge, and into the streets where border guards watch every passing car. It's a straight line that divides everyday life. One side drives on the left, the other on the right. One speaks English, the other Spanish. Yet people cross back and forth each day for work, for shopping and family. But not everything is as open as it seems. Right next to the airport runway lies restricted Spanish airspace, Gibraltar's airport, one of the most complicated and risky to fly in or out of. Planes land and take off while carefully watched from both sides. And what's more, international diplomacy is always just beneath the surface. Number 11, the border where Europe meets Africa. Tucked along the northern edge of Africa lies a small city that shouldn't make sense on a map, yet it exists, fortified and firm. This is Melilla, a very small city, covering just about 4 2/3 square miles, and it shares something unique with its neighbor, Ceuta. These are the only two places in the entire world where Europe and Africa touch by land, which is why there's a huge fence separating them. This fence, however, isn't just a simple wall. It's built in 3 strong layers, stands around 23 feet high, and stretches for more than 6 miles. Most of it was paid for by European taxpayers, and it's packed with radar, security cameras, and motion detectors. There have even been plans to add more razor wire on top. And even though it might look like someone could climb it, the truth is, it's nearly impossible to cross alone because of how massive and heavily guarded it is. The African continent of Melilla is a fully governed part of Spain, and although it's surrounded by African soil, everything inside it, from the currency to the hospitals, belongs to Europe. Spanish police guard its streets, Spanish laws rule its courts, and European Union policies shape daily life. Here, Euros buy tapas in seaside cafes, and Mediterranean promenades stretch under Spanish architecture. But once you step inland, that calm disappears behind steel. On the other side of the fence in Morocco, things are very different. Many people from other parts of Africa come here, hoping to find a better life in Europe. They've often escaped war, hunger, or danger in their own countries. So they wait in the hills near Melilla, living in tents or shelters made from sticks and cloth, just watching the fence, hoping for a chance to cross. Other times, when big groups try to climb the fence all at once, using ladders made from wood or scrap metal, some get caught, and sadly, some people have died trying. Notwithstanding, over the years, Spain has made small efforts to soften the border's appearance, removing some razor wire in favor of rounded panels meant to prevent fatal injuries. Melilla, along with its sister city Ceuta, represents one of the only places where Europe shares a direct land border with Africa. That fact alone makes it politically volatile. Morocco maintains that Melilla is rightfully theirs, a remnant of colonial times that should be reclaimed. Spain, backed by the European Union, insists otherwise, saying Melilla is just as much a part of Spain as any other city. So now the fence remains. On one side, there's a life filled with safety, jobs, and opportunity. On the other hand, people are waiting and struggling, hoping that one day they'll make it to the other side. Number 10. The France-Brazil border. Brazil shares its longest border with France. That's a fact most people don't know. At about 454 miles long, Brazil's longest land border is with French Guiana. Often mistaken for a country, but in truth it's not independent at all. It's part of France itself. French Guiana uses the euro, follows French laws, and even sends representatives to the French Parliament. And the kids growing up here, they're European citizens. Although it's thousands of miles away from Europe, it's considered European soil. So when you cross the Oyapock River Bridge that links them, you're not just changing towns. You're stepping into the European Union. After years of delay, the bridge opened in 2017, stretches 378 meters over the water. On one side, Oiapoque, a Brazilian town in the state of Amapá. On the other hand, Saint Georges de l'Oyapock, a French commune in the heart of the rainforest. But the contrast is immediate. In Oiapoque, the streets are dusty, infrastructure is limited. Most people rely on fishing, cocoa farming, or informal trade to get by. On the French side, roads are paved, clinics are modern, and schools follow the national curriculum from Paris. Signs are in French, phones connect to French networks. Even the police wear the same uniforms as seen in Marseille or Lyon. Until recently, Brazilians needed a visa to cross. But in June 2025, France lifted the requirement for Brazilians. Now, more people are crossing than ever before, for school, work, groceries, or healthcare. But the connection isn't new. Canoes have always moved back and forth. Families live split across both sides. Locals even joke that the bridge is the most expensive way to realize how far Europe still feels, even when it's just across the river. And yet, these two places depend on each other. Number 9. The China-North Korea Time Warp. When it comes to fascinating borders, few places rival the striking contrast between China and North Korea. In Dandong, bright lights and busy streets define daily life, while across the Yalu River, Sinuiju remains quiet and restrained. Divided only by water, these cities are linked by the China-North Korea Friendship Bridge. They also reflect two vastly different worlds in culture, economy, and freedom. Dandong thrives with tourism, trade, and nightlife, while North Koreans live with restriction and silence. Yet, shared history, ethnic ties, and border markets connect them. From frozen rivers in winter to women selling tours and souvenirs, the border offers a rare glimpse into two realities, so close, yet worlds apart. Number 8. The China-Nepal Border. At Earth's rooftop, the border between China and Nepal runs directly over the summit of Mount Everest. One step to the left, you're in Tibet. One to the right, you're in Nepal. However, the routes to either side differ wildly. Nepal's side bustles with colorful villages, prayer flags, and trekkers. On the other side, China's side is tightly regulated, with paved roads, checkpoints, and far fewer climbers. Even here, politics seep into the snow. Nepal has faced pressure to control protests from Tibetans, with China controlling permits and press access. Number 7. The Norway and Russia Border. Up in Europe's frozen Arctic edge, where snow covers the ground for most of the year and silence stretches for miles, two worlds meet. On one side of a narrow, icy river stands Norway, clean, modern, and democratic. On the other side, Russia, harsher, stricter, and tightly controlled. In Kirkenes, Teslas glide through snow-covered streets. People fish, ski, and sit in warm saunas with free internet at their fingertips. But cross the water to Boris Gleb, and everything turns gray. Old apartment blocks loom under the watch of armed guards. The air is still. The mood is tense. You feel watched. So how can two towns, separated by only a frozen stream, feel like they belong to different centuries? At first glance, the border near Kirkenes looks quiet. Just snowbanks, yellow border posts, and a road that vanishes into the Arctic forest. This is Storskog, the only land crossing between NATO and Russia above the Arctic Circle. For decades, it was more than just a checkpoint. It was a symbol. Even during the Cold War, when East and West bristled with suspicion, this frozen frontier kept a thin line of cooperation alive. But everything changed in 2022. After Russia invaded Ukraine, the border's daily rhythm was disrupted. Hundreds of people used to cross every day, shoppers, workers, and families. Now it's mostly trucks and officials. Russia, however, tightened its exit rules, and Norway, with no choice, watched the flow nearly disappear. At the bottom of it all, Kirkenes, a small Norwegian town right on the edge, felt it all. Once Kirkenes was a rare Arctic bridge between nations. Russian language signs hung on shops. Bilingual schools welcomed kids from both sides. Locals crossed freely for everything from dental work to groceries. For years, this was the kind of peace the town lived in. But that peace was broken when that war began. Today, the Norway-Russia border is quiet. At Storskog, under 100 people cross daily, far fewer than the nearly 1,000 per day seen in 2013. The border remains open, mainly for Russians with visas visiting family in Europe or dual citizens living in the north. And although Norway bans Russian cars under sanctions, many Russians now use vehicles with Armenian or Kazakh plates to get around the rules and continue commuting across the border. The border is still there, but the spirit of connection that once defined it has nearly vanished. Number 6. The United Arab Emirates and Oman border. This is one of the strangest borders in the world. It stretches for roughly 378 miles, but this line is not all in one place. Instead, the border between the United Arab Emirates and Oman is broken into 3 separate parts. It winds through mountains, deserts, and cities, sometimes without fences or any sign at all. And even though it separates 2 countries, in many places, it feels like life on both sides is closely connected. In the far north, there's a rocky area called the Musandam Peninsula. It belongs to Oman, but it's surrounded by the UAE. The mountains here are steep, and they drop into the sea at the Strait of Hormuz. The border in this area doesn't follow a straight path. Instead, it twists and turns with the land. Then comes the middle section, which is a real puzzle. A place called Mada. Mada is part of Oman, but sits inside the UAE. And inside Mada, there's another smaller area called Nahwa, which belongs to the UAE again. That means if you're driving through, you can go from Oman to the UAE to Oman and back to the UAE, all within a few miles. But there are no border checks here. People just come and go. There are also small villages, winding roads, and neighbors who've known each other for years. Further south is the longest part of the border. It starts near the Gulf of Oman and moves inland past places like Kalba and Hatta, then down toward the Saudi border. In this area, the UAE built a 4-meter-tall barbed wire fence in 2002 to stop illegal crossings and smuggling. But even this fence doesn't cover everything, especially not the enclaves like Madha and Nahwa. In many towns, however, the difference between the 2 countries is hard to notice. In the city of Al Ain, for example, you might be standing in the UAE, but if you cross the street, you're in Oman, in a quieter town called Barami. The big malls fade into small markets. The road gets narrower. What's more, people still live, work, and shop on both sides. Yes, some families are split between the 2 countries. Goods move across the line every day, and while governments have made rules, built fences, and set up checkpoints, the people who live here don't always see those lines. To them, this border isn't a wall. It's just part of life. Number 5. The China-Hong Kong border. The China-Hong Kong border slices straight through ideologies, laws, and even how people think. It's a short distance, often just a narrow river called the Shenzhen River, but it separates 2 different worlds. On one side, you have Hong Kong, a towering financial hub shaped by British colonial rule, with an open internet, international courts, and Western freedoms. On the other side is Shenzhen, a city that evolved from a sleepy fishing village into a megatech metropolis ruled by tight government control, surveillance, and media censorship. What's so strange is how close and peaceful this border looks. You can walk across it using footpaths or hop on a train, but once you do, you feel it instantly. While one side has protests and open opinions, the other silences critics. This is a border where the open web meets a digital firewall, and where daily crossings by over 200,000 people have now slowed under China's tightening grip. But how did we even get here? Why is this one river so important to both sides? To understand that, you have to go back nearly 200 years because this story begins with a cup of tea. In the 1800s, Britain craved Chinese tea, but China raised prices. To keep trade going, Britain smuggled opium from India into China, and soon the addiction spread fast. When China fought back, it triggered the Opium War. China lost and gave up Hong Kong in the Treaty of Nanking. More wars followed, and Britain took more land. Hong Kong grew under British rule, with its laws, economy, and identity. Britain handed it back in 1997 under a deal. One country, two systems. But now that system is fading. China's control is rising. And by 2047, Hong Kong's future remains a mystery. Number 4. The Netherlands-Belgium puzzle border. In the heart of Europe lies a town so ordinary you might drive through it without a second glance. But look down and you'll notice something strange. A white cross. Then another. Each one slicing through streets, doorways, and even dinner tables. This is Barl, and it holds one of the most tangled borders on Earth. Here, international boundaries aren't found at checkpoints. A shoe store could have its front in Belgium and its back in the Netherlands. A house might need 2 addresses, one for each country. And this isn't just rare, it's brilliantly chaotic. Barley is home to 30 enclaves. 22 Belgium territories are fully surrounded by the Netherlands, and inside those Belgium bits, 10 Dutch enclaves are like islands inside islands. Confused? So are most people. Even locals admit it's a border puzzle that only history could write. Everywhere you look, there's a double of something. 2 post offices, 2 phone codes, 2 churches that chime at slightly different times. There are 2 police stations, 2 bus systems, and even 2 different drinking ages. Walk into a chicken shop and you'll see 2 mayo dispensers. One Belgium, one Dutch. The locals just call it normal. And what about the government? Of course, 2 town halls, one Dutch, one Belgium. They even share a single meeting room where the border runs straight through the floor. Half the council sits in the Netherlands, the other in Belgium. The reason for this twisted map dates back to the Middle Ages, when medieval rulers traded land like baseball cards. The Duke of Brabant held the Belgium pieces, while the Lord of Breda claimed the Dutch ones. Fast forward a few centuries and the legacy of those land deals is still splitting buildings in half. In fact, one couple had to say their vows in the Dutch half of their living room because the Belgium side wouldn't allow it. Yet, the town runs smoothly. Garbage collection, emergency services, and utilities are shared. Tourists walk freely, often crossing borders without even noticing. And somehow, it all works. Number 3. The US-Canada Library Border. In a corner where 2 countries touch, the Haskell Free Library and Opera House stands as a living monument to one of the most unique borders on Earth. Here, a single black line painted across the floor divides the United States and Canada from Darby Line, Vermont, to the south, and Stansted, Quebec, to the north. Visitors don't just read books, they cross nations. The building straddles the world's longest international boundary without fences or guards inside, a place where a reader's left foot can rest in Canada while their right turns a page in America. For decades, a handshake agreement allowed Canadians to walk through American territory to reach the library. But now, new restrictions are cracking down, and what was once a symbol of unity and trust has become a contested zone. Number 2. South Africa-Lesotho border. The border between Lesotho and South Africa is like no other. It forms a complete loop, wrapping all the way around Lesotho, because Lesotho is the only country in the world fully surrounded by just one other country. The border follows rivers like the Caledon and Orange and climbs high into the Drakensberg Mountains. Crossing this border isn't just about stepping into another country, it's about going up. Lesotho is so high up that it's called the Kingdom in the Sky. As you leave South Africa's smooth roads and busy towns, the ground starts to rise. You pass winding dirt roads, cold winds, and small stone homes. On one side, there are fast internet and gas stations. On the other, there's the cold winds and hills. Number 1. Haiti and the Dominican Republic. On the island of Hispaniola, two nations share a jagged border, but their paths couldn't be more different. On one side, the Dominican Republic thrives as a tourist hotspot with relative order. On the other hand, Haiti descends deeper into chaos, struggling under the weight of armed gangs, hunger, and political collapse. Despite international pressure and a UN-backed mission, Haitian authorities have failed to stop the rise of violence. Guns pour in freely, even though a UN arms embargo was put in place years ago. In the middle of this growing humanitarian emergency, the Dominican Republic made a controversial decision. In late 2024, President Luis Abinader, a close ally of US President Donald Trump, announced an aggressive new policy. The government would deport 10,000 Haitians every week, regardless of the crisis just across the border. It was a decision that stunned many, and it was the reason why a team of journalists began filming at the chaotic crossing near Belgium, where Dominican officials were dropping off busloads of deportees every single day. The scene was harsh. Men, women, and barefoot children, many clutching babies, were being dumped in muddy fields with no money, no way to call anyone, and nowhere safe to go. Some had been working or heading to appointments when immigration officers grabbed them off the streets or pulled them out of cars. The arrests were often violent. One 18-year-old was shot and left behind. Others tried to flee across rooftops, only to be chased down and tackled. One man was even shoved off a roof, his fate unknown. But what happens once they're arrested before they're even pushed across the border? Inside the detention centers, things are even worse. Migrants are crammed into filthy rooms. There's barely enough space to sit, and the stench is overwhelming. And so the Dominican Republic continues its mass deportation campaign, pushing tens of thousands into a nation unraveling before our eyes. Meanwhile, those being cast out have no home to return to, no nation to protect them, and no hope in sight. And that's the thing about borders. They show us just how much can change, from one side to the other. We hope you enjoyed this video.